Hi, everybody. Please turn your cell phones off. God, I love saying that, and it's so nice to be back here at the Writers Guild Theater after 4 years. Thank you. Thanks so much for coming to tonight's Writer's Block event with Stacey Abrams and Dulé Hill. I'm Andrea Grossman, the founder of Writer's Block, now in our 28th year. Thank you. God, what a cheering section tonight. I'm so grateful to Stacey for returning to Writer's Block, and enormous thanks to Dulé for chatting with Stacey tonight. Now for tonight. Stacey has been at the forefront of social justice and social activism her entire adult life. It has defined her and informed pretty much everything she's done, including her romance literature and legal thrillers. The thing about fiction is that a writer can throw dozens of issues and ideas at you, and sometimes you as the reader know that it's just fun fiction. But in certain hands, it's different. Stacey writes terrific fiction, and she's infused it with smart, successful Black women who know how to steer the ship through corruption, racism, the court system, conspiracy, and so much more. Sounds like any old day in Atlanta. In her recent thriller, Rogue Justice, we could easily be reading the headlines or what's successfully kept out of the headlines: abuse of power, abuse of privacy, technology gone off the rails, all themes that make the reader gallop through this novel. It's a story that reflects our current moment with a terrific protagonist who has a commitment to social justice and who really does change our world, sort of like Stacey Abrams. Dulé Hill is no stranger to wonderful protagonists, from Charlie on the West Wing, to Gus on Sight, to Bill in the Wonder Years, and so many more in between. Dulé so effortlessly glides between drama and comedy, sometimes in the same breath. But like Stacey, he's no stranger to social activism. In his upcoming PBS documentary series called The Expressway, Dulé explores art and performance as a mechanism to connect people, to transform communities for the better, to foster social change, and to break down social barriers through art. That premieres later this month. So here's what's going to happen tonight. Dulé and Stacey will chat. And when they're through, we'll have time for a few questions. There will be mics in the aisle, and we'll do what we can with time. So thank you very much. Please welcome Stacey Abrams and Dulé Hill.
I need to walk everywhere with Stacey, you see? Yeah, please. That's what I need in my life.
I think they were clapping for you.
Well, thank you all for coming out. This is a wonderful moment in time. Just to be able to share some time with you, Stacey, is truly an honor. I'm a big fan of yours. I've been a fan of yours for such a long time. Your civic engagement, your passion for the people, your, the energy that you have to inspire people to engage is truly encouraging along this life's journey. There's so much craziness that goes on into the world. You look towards beacons of light, and you definitely are one. You know, I've known, thank you, all right. Now, obviously, we know that you are the dynamic politician that you are, and that you are the civic leader that you are. I will say I did not know that you were this magnificent writer that you are. I mean, beyond, okay, you have nonfiction, you have romantic novels, you have suspense thriller, political thrillers, you have children's books. Bring us back a little bit and take us to how you became a writer. How long has writing been a part of your life?
Well, first of all, I get to sit here with Dulé Hill, so that's kind of awesome. And secondly, I'm gonna come to the question, but before we do that, we're gonna do something else. So a lot of you have your phones up, and you're really annoying the people behind you. So Dulé and I are gonna stand in each section of the stage and let you guys take all the pictures you want, and then we're gonna put our phones in our laps and our listening ears on, and we're gonna have fun.
All
Ready?
right. All right, let's do it. Are we going to go same side? All right, let's go. Come over here. Whoop, watch out. All right, here we go.
Three. Okay, here we go. You got it. One.
Down.
Okay, 1, 2, 3.
All right, all right. You see?
I wrote this book so I could do that. One, 2, 3. You just found a flat.
It was very impressive how she like counts without moving her mouth, though, right? Political activist, ventriloquist.
Okay, last group. Ready? As I was saying.
Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, one, I'm just excited to be here with you, and I appreciate you being such a good sport. I am the daughter of Robert and Carolyn Abrams. My mom, when I was growing up, was a librarian, and my dad was a shipyard worker. My parents had no money. My mom used to call us the genteel poor. We had no money, but we watched PBS and we read books. And one of the markers of our less than stellar status was that when daycare ended, there was a daycare at my mom's job, but it ended before her job did. So we used to sleep in the stacks. So I literally slept surrounded by books, like 1 and 2 years old, because there was nowhere else for us to go. And so my earliest memories are of books. And then I have an older sister who is lovely and wonderful, but she's the oldest of the 6 of us. And she got frustrated with me early on. She didn't like reading the same book over and over again. She's 3 years older. And so she taught me to read mainly so I would shut up and leave her alone. So I learned to read really young. And then I realized if you could read and you could write, you could tell your own stories. If you said it out loud, it was a lie, but if you wrote it down, it was a story. And so I became a writer.
We're going to steal that. Yes, we have a 4-year-old son at home, and I guarantee you either myself or my wife Jasmine will say that to Levi tomorrow.
Yeah, there you go.
But if you say it out loud, it's a lie. But if you write it down, it's a story.
It is. It changes everything.
Go write your story, son.
There you go. Exactly. That was it for me. I wrote my first attempt at a book when I was really young. I wrote my first novel, a very short novel called A Diary of Angst when I was 12. I had a very, very tortured 12-year-old year. It was a boy who didn't like me and a girl who was mean to me. It was chaos. And yeah, I've been writing ever since.
So you've actually been writing more than you've been involved in political activism from a young age.
Well, no, my parents were mean. No, not mean. So my parents there were 3 rules. Go to church, go to school, take care of each other. So you go to church because they wanted us to be grounded in a faith tradition. They wanted us to know that there was something larger than us, something bigger than our experiences. And sometimes, given the paucity of our world, they wanted us to know that we weren't only defined by what we had or didn't have. They said go to school because both of my parents came from the sort of abject poverty you imagine Mississippi to be. And they grew up during Jim Crow. And for both of them, my parents were both the first people in their families to go to college. My mom was the first one to finish high school. My dad was the first one to go to college, first man in his family to go to college, but my dad was dyslexic and didn't actually learn to read functionally until he was in his 30s. So he memorized his way through school, which is part of Avery's eidetic memory thing. But for both of them, they believed that the third job we had was to take care of each other. And for them, that meant social justice. My dad was arrested when he was 14, registering black people to vote in Mississippi. We tease him, my mom did the same job. She just managed not to get caught. But activism, and it wasn't called activism. For them, it was just you do right. And you do right by those who either cannot or do not know they have the right to more. And so as much as I wrote and read, every Saturday we would volunteer, which annoyed me because Super Friends used to only come on Saturdays. And we would miss it because we have to go to the soup kitchen. I'm like, you guys know we're poor too, right? And they did not care. And so the activism was as much of my upbringing as the writing was. And often for me, for my parents, they toggled between the two. So one time my mom wanted to help kids in one of the housing projects in Gulfport, Mississippi, and no one would help finance it. And so she just called it Vacation Bible School. And we were able to take books, and I mean, if you add a religion to it, people will pay for it. And so that's how we did literacy in a housing development in Mississippi. And so for me, the connection between the writing and storytelling, but also activism, has always been of a piece.
It's all connected. And so we also realize that we've learned if you write it down, it's a story. And if you put religion on it, somebody will pay for it.
There you go.
So, these are the proverbs of Stacey Abrams, everybody. It will take you far. So, Selena Montgomery.
Yes.
How does this person come to be?
Okay. So loved writing, was really bad at dating. So I dated this guy in high school. I wasn't allowed to date till I was 16. I was a senior in high school, or end of my junior year, my senior year. And there was this chemist nerd who I just had my heart set on, because when I moved to Georgia, I met him. And anyway, so Derek and I kind of sort of dated. And then in college, my freshman year of college, he broke up with me by voicemail. Actually, answering machine, because it was before voice. I was bitter. But I learned to forgive, and so over time, we became friends again. And when I was in law school, he was in grad school. He was a chemical physicist. He was doing his dissertation, and he sent it to me to read, because I'm like one of 4 people who would read his dissertation who wasn't paid to do it. And I read it, and I was like, ooh, this is fascinating, because he discovered this chemical that could react with other chemicals, could interact with other chemicals without reacting. So I actually wanted to write a spy novel. I wanted to write a spy novel about this technology that could be used, that was intended for environmental good, but was commandeered by a terrorist organization and was going to wreak havoc. And so this chemical physicist, my heroine, was going to have to save the day, and she had a tortured background. I was very proud of the story. I loved espionage novels. And so I had some friends who were in publishing, and I sent it to them, and I'm like, what do you think about this idea? And to a person, they said no. So this is 98, 99. So publishers do not believe that women read spy novels, and they didn't think men would read a spy novel by or about a woman. And if you think back to the late 90s, name a single woman who wrote espionage. Didn't happen. And then I had the temerity to say that the character should be black. And that was just stupid. And so I was essentially told, this is a fantastic idea, no one's gonna publish it. And I thought, I know I've read romance. So I know I've read spies, and I realized, no, I've watched General Hospital. And that's when, if you want to see women in espionage, it was General Hospital or in a romance novel. That was it. Those were the only places we got to be spies. And there were no black women in romance at the time, very much. You had some traditional, you had Brenda Jackson and Beverly Jenkins, but there were very few black women who were able to put characters of color on the cover of their books. But I'm in law school at Yale, and apparently I'm supposed to be learning stuff, and I learned to merge my interest. And so I had the same spies. I just made them fall in love after I killed the same people I planned to kill in the first place. And I got excited, and so I sent it off to a publisher, and she was actually leaving one publishing house, going to another, because she was hired to start creating black romantic suspense. Because at the time, there were only black, if you were a black writer who got your books published, you had to do traditional romance, or what was called culturally specific romance, or urban romance. Basically, black people writing for black people. which I found not offensive, but I found very limiting. And I wanted to write about this chemical physicist who is a spy. And by the way, in the book, Derek, whose dissertation this book is based on, he is languishing in prison to this day because he shouldn't have left me that voicemail. But I wrote the book, she picked it up, she bought it, and the reason it's under Selena Montgomery is that I was finishing up in law school. I was also writing tax policy. And so my first major paper was on the operational dissonance of the unrelated business income tax exemption, which I'm sure you've all read. And Google had just become a thing. And so one of my dear friends said, Google your name. And I'm like, do what to my name? He was like, go to your computer. And so I waited for 4 days for it to dial up. And then I put in my name, and up popped an essay I'd written in high school. And I'm like, wait, no one is going, so I had my tax personality out there. I had my new romance novel that was coming out. Like, no one is going to read romance by Alan Greenspan.
That is true.
It was not going to happen. And if they looked up my name and saw that I was writing this other, so you can write romance under pseudonym, you could not write tax policy under pseudonym. And so I became Selena Montgomery.
Just like that. You know what's interesting to me is I hear that, you didn't take no for an answer, because they said, well, no, you don't write suspense or espionage books. That doesn't happen. But you figured a way around it. And I feel that that's something that stayed with you throughout the course of your journey, where it's like you continuously find ways around. You don't really wait for someone to say, come on in. You say, no, I'm coming in. I'm going to get in. And I think that's really a wonderful, wonderful thing. Now, as we get to Avery Keene, which is a dynamic character. I mean, she is powerful, she is awesome, she is courageous, she's brilliant, she's really every good thing. How did you get to Avery Keene? How did you get to While Justice Sleeps? And how did you get to Rogue Justice?
So, wrote romance as Selena Montgomery. The way I put it, I could pay a car note, I could not buy a car. And so I was still a tax attorney, and then I began what my mom calls my trajectory of downward economic mobility. So I left my job as a tax attorney and went to work for the city of Atlanta, and then that was paying me too much, so I ran for office. Became a state legislator, was still writing romance. But in the end of 2010, my party, my Democratic Party, we got shellacked. I was a rank and file member, but in Georgia, Democrats lost every statewide election. We lost the Senate we were within 3 of a supermajority. The House was not that close, but pretty close. And so I was like, hey, I want to be in charge. So I raised my hand and said, I want to run for minority leader. And then, I got the job. So when that happened, it was at the same time I was under contract for my next, we were about to negotiate a contract for another romance novel, and I'm like, I don't think I can do all of these things at once. Well, a year or so before then, I had lunch with a woman named Teresa Wynn Roseborough, who was one of the lead partners at my old firm. And she was telling me, she was like, Stacey, did you realize, and you may know this, having spent time on the West Wing, she said, did you know that the Constitution has a provision for a president who can't fulfill their job, the 25th Amendment, and if it's someone in Congress, you just unelect them, but that the Constitution is silent on any federal judge who's simply incapable of doing your job. They can only be removed for high crimes, misdemeanor, or death. Simply not being good or, being in a coma does not give you the right to take them off the court. And that goes from a district court judge all the way to the Supreme Court. And she said that to me, and I'm thinking, that seems like an oversight.
Gotcha.
This is kind of problematic. And so I ruminated on it, and it's 2008, 2009. And then there was a story about a woman who was in persistent vegetative state, and I thought, and the idea came back to me again. So I was still under contract writing romance, but decided to try my hand at a legal thriller. And once again, when I finished my novel, I sent it off. This time I had an agent who liked it, but said, I'm not sure if anyone will take it. And he shopped it around, and the response was, This is an interesting story about a Supreme Court justice who's in a coma, and a president who is involved in international intrigue. But Stacey, it's not realistic. And so it got rejected over and over. They were like, yeah, and nobody cares about the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is completely boring. I mean, it's just nobody cares. So this is 2009, 2010. So I become minority leader. I don't write romance anymore because I didn't want to do a new contract since I was trying to rebuild my state party. And nobody liked While Justice Sleeps, so I put it in a drawer. Fast forward, 2018, I applied for this job, didn't get it. And this guy who was really persistent, named Darnell Strom. Darnell, raise your hand. Darnell Strom. So Darnell kept bothering me. He was like, you should tell people your story. I'm like, they were there, and I don't want to relive it, so no. And anyway, he convinced me that there was actually some other aspect to my creativity that I could exploit. And I came out here, and I got to meet these wonderful people. And so we were meeting with some producers. And one of them said, have you done anything other than romance? And I said, well, yeah, I wrote this legal thriller a while back. And they were like, what's it about? And I'm like, it's about this, a Supreme Court clerk who gets guardianship of a Supreme Court justice who's the swing vote, and there's a president who might be going to prison. They're like, what? Like, oh my God, where is that book? And I'm like, I don't know. I think it's still on my computer. And so I pull it up. My agent, my literary agent, I call her and I'm like, hey, did I ever tell you about this book I wrote? She's like, what? I'm like, yeah, I've had it for about 10 years. And so, we had to update it because I still had landlines in it, answering machines. It was very anachronistic in that way. But because of the wonderful folks at UTA, I brought it out of the mothballs, and Avery Keene got a new life. And then when folks decided they liked her, I was invited to write a second one. And in the first one, it was really a question of what do you do when you have authority, when you have responsibility but no authority. She had to save the world, and she wasn't supposed to be able to do so. The second book, Rogue Justice, was one, somebody paid me for it, and I was like, thank God they like her. She's so good. But it was what happens next, or before 2024. So I wanted to know what would happen. Like you do the thing you're supposed to do. Do you get celebrated for it? Mm-hmm. I have found the answer is no. So what do you do when you do what you think is the right thing, but the consequences aren't what you imagined? And what do you do when you realize that the world, as it's organized, does not deliver what it promises? And so that was Rogue Justice.
Yeah, I mean, you answered a lot of what I was getting ready to ask you.
Sorry.
You see what I'm saying?
You ask really thoughtful questions,
man.
man.
You see what?
You ask really thoughtful questions.
You see? But I will say this. You got a quote where it says, politics is a fancy word for how we treat each other. Government is nothing more than an assembly of people deciding who we value and how we're going to show who we value. And that really resonated with me as I was reading Rogue Justice. Because so much of what happens is about that. It is about who do we value, whose word do we value, and and what happens when you don't value the right people. Well, really, what happens when you don't value the community, the collective of us. And then I had a question of what was the impetus for creating this world of espionage, politics, and intrigue, but you already answered that. So, I heard you mention a name, though, so I'm going to jump a little bit.
Okay.
Because I was wondering in the book, one, are the characters named after anybody real? Are there real people in this world who show up in this book maybe under different positions? Maybe different personalities?
So, as you try to get me in trouble, I will answer this in two ways. One, I have a rule. I use the names of real people. I ask their permission, and the rule is you might be mean and you might die. If you're good with that, then you'll be in a book. She is hoping I don't say this, but there's a character, Samantha Schlossberg. Mm-hmm. She's not the President of the United States. She is, however, my chief of staff.
Yes.
So She doesn't do any of the stuff that I say she does. She does not secretly dispose of the president. So I like to use real people. I like to use real people's names because, one, if you know those people, it's like a nice little Easter egg. I do composite characters, so I try not to be as pedestrian or as predictable as to take someone who exists and then just slightly change them. But I look for traits and for characteristics and archetypes, and then how do you tweak them so that you're never really sure how you feel. Even with Brandon Stokes, I mean, he's the president. He's smart. He's savvy. He was a hero who becomes a villain in his way. But part of us can understand, maybe not what he did, but there's something that says, in Rogue Justice, I have characters there are very few characters who are all good or all bad. There are very few people who are all good or all bad. There are a lot of people who like to go as far to the bad as they can without going straight to hell. And there are some people who think that they are so good that they can't be held accountable. And so I try to write stories based on the people I've experienced in politics, people I've worked with in business, citizens and folks that I've met who have questions. And I try to write stories and create characters that are not exactly a one-to-one match. And in my defense, I wrote it in 2010. So I didn't know about some other folks. At the time, they were on TV saying, "You're fired." They were not, there was no intentionality there. But what we know from history, what we know from public policy is that there are certain threads of human behavior that repeat themselves, that reveal themselves. And while it's not a one-to-one, part of my mission is to say, look, this is what you're looking for. It's not this archetype, it's this ethic. It's this set of questions. It's the way they think about how they fit into the world. When you think that you're the only solution, you have a very dangerous disposition, and you may be the best person at the moment you think that, but therein lies the kernel of your destruction, or the kernel of our destruction if you think that you are infallible and you can't be questioned.
Yeah. What about the character Darnell Strom?
Again, I use the names. Look, you get to live. That's as much as I can guarantee
Well,
you.
I would tell you, I know Darnell Strom, and I was actually reading the book.
Yes.
And I was like, wait, what? I said, in my mind, I was like, am I going crazy here? I was like, no, that's
Look,
Darnell.
you
That's
might-
not Darnell, but that is Darnell.
You might show up somewhere. Who knows? Depends on what else is on those cards.
Well, see, will I give you permission to use my name next time you write something?
Well,
you
thank
see?
you.
We've all heard it. So, like, and then Dulé Hill, the international spy.
There you go.
But no, when I play a character, though, because I want to dive deeper into Avery Keene, when I play a character, I have to really connect to the character. Whether it's a positive character or a negative character, I make sure I don't judge the character. I understand how they move, what makes them tick, and they become a part of me and vice versa. How much of Avery is connected to you?
So I think when you create a character, either in acting or as a writer, you imbue a character with parts of yourself, either parts you wish you had, parts you don't necessarily like, and maybe it's an exorcism, parts that you want to know more about. And for me, Avery, like, I was never a Supreme Court clerk, never wanted to be, but I understand some of the challenges. I understand that moment in your life when you're trying to figure out who you are, when your family demands sometimes overwhelm your sense of possibility. I have a pretty good memory. I don't have an eidetic memory, but I like the fact that she uses what she knows to learn more. I love that curiosity that she has. I love her swagger. she's someone who isn't going to look for a fight, but she's not going to walk away from it. And it's what I hope I'm like. And so I think the fun of writing these characters, and I've written a few books, each of the characters has some things that I wish I was, some things I probably shouldn't be. And things that I would love to, in an alternate life, ways I would like to move through the world.
Got it. Now, there's two parts of, there's two quotes I have from you. One I would like you to talk about first. But when I read those quotes, I feel like they were reflective inside of Avery. One was when you talk about 1991 when you were chosen as a valedictorian of a high school, and you were invited to the valedictorian's reception at the governor's mansion. And as you got to the gate, well, I want you to tell the story. Yes, you tell the story.
I've got Dulé Hill telling my story. No.
All right, here we go. So as you got to the gate, you know, you went with your parents. You took the bus there to the reception to be with other valedictorians, and the guard at the gate told you to leave. I guess from their point of view, you did not belong there. The mistake was eventually corrected, but the experience stuck with you. And you said that, you know, you don't remember meeting the governor during that time, and you don't remember meeting your fellow valedictorians, but what you do remember that day was a man at the gate telling you that you don't belong. And you vowed that you would never let someone make you feel out of place again. That is such power to have. And especially at that age to have, because someone could hear something like that and it can really set them on a different journey. But for you, you met this force that came against you and you chose to rise above it. And then this one I'm going to have you talk about, which is when you were on a town hall, a televised town hall, and you told Mayor Maynard Jackson that he was not doing enough for young people. Yes. And then, of course, I'm sure that was not received very well. He did not like it, and he really wanted to know, what do you know? And then you told him that you've been to zone meetings, you've been engaged, and you know a lot. And then on top of that, you left the staff your number and your parents' number and said, this is where I am if you have any questions. But the story doesn't end there, because about a year later, these same people reached out to you and you became a part of his staff, or one of his committees, which is the Office of Youth Services that you became a part of. Yes. And you were the only undergrad college student who was a hire. I mean, the boldness of you, it's really inspiring. I mean, I'm just in awe of it.
You do a lot of research. Okay.
You see?
I said, you do a lot of research.
But as you read Avery Keene, though, you see that same presence inside of her, where she's going to step into a place and not be rejected. She's going to keep pressing towards what she knows to be the truth. Is that when you were writing the character, was that something that was intentional to have that extension of you in the role?
I try to write stories that are informed by my story, but not reflective of it entirely. So, you know, with the valedictorian issue, like, I remember this man, I mean, he was a state trooper who basically told me, you know, you don't belong here. And whether it was race or class, it didn't really matter, because he decided I didn't matter. And to your point, there's this moment in While Justice Sleeps where Avery has to grapple with, like, why her? She's not important enough to have this job. She's not important enough to be responsible in this way. And I will always carry that sensibility, because I always have to remember, I decide, not you. You can decide you don't want me, but you're not going to decide where I go. Those are two very different things. Mm-hmm. And too often we tell ourselves, we do the whole play in our heads, and when we get to the place where we're told no, that's where we stop and we decide we're not going to bother. I reject that as a construct. Because most of the places I want to go, no one like me has ever been, and I want to know what's in there. I want to know what it's like. But I also know that part of my opportunity is to create space for others to also imagine that they could do it. And that, for me, is part of Avery's journey, that she's not going to be defined by what people expect of her. She's going to be informed by it, but she's not going to be defined by it. When you're informed by it, you know that they might lock the gate. That's why you figure out where the back door is. If you're defined by it, then you decide that, no, you're not entitled to open the gate. You're not entitled to go inside. When I had my disagreement with Maynard Jackson, I was also just obnoxious. It was after the Rodney King protest, and and so, you had what happened here in LA, but in Atlanta, they actually tear gassed the Atlanta University Center. So this consortium of 5 black colleges, they shut down the interstate, and they cordoned us off because one of the oldest housing developments in the state was next door to our campuses. And there were indeed protests. Students were protesting, but it wasn't violent at first. But they were so afraid of what it could be that they basically cordoned off our area, and I was annoyed. So I set up a phone bank. I got some friends of mine at Spelman. We started calling. This is for anyone under 40. This makes no sense to you, but these things called phones, where you had to dial. And we started dialing the news because there were only 3 channels, and they were all saying that we were running amok. And I'm like, no, we're taking exams and we're protesting, but we're not doing anything wrong. And after a while, when we were calling, we were blocking the number, that we were blocking their lines. And so they started asking, well, who's calling? And so someone, because I'd organized all of my friends in my dorm and a couple of other dorms, and they're like, Stacey, they want to know who's calling. I'm like, just tell them you're me. I did not think this through. So you had like 47 young women calling over and over again to ABC, NBC, and CBS saying you're telling them wrong, it's not true what you're saying, and this is Stacey Abrams saying it. So they sent a police car to Spelman to come get me. And I'm like, I didn't know I could be arrested for rabble-rousing, but I should have learned from my dad. So I get called to the president's office, and she's like, what did you do? I'm like, it wasn't I just told them to say it was me. So she said, you've been invited to the simulcast. Again, for translation, a simulcast was when a bunch of different television stations did stuff together. So she's like, and they sent a police car to get you because you're not allowed to leave the Atlanta University Center because they'd shut down the highway. So they had to give me a ride. And I'm in my cleanest t-shirt and my nicest jeans. And I get there, and the mayor is there, and he has just tear gassed me and my friends, and I'm a little put out. And so, yes, he basically says, I don't understand why y'all are complaining. You are some of the most privileged black people in America, and and he acknowledged that those who lived outside the gates of the AUC had real issues, but he was put out. And he was a graduate of Morehouse, so he was a graduate of one of the colleges, and he didn't understand why we were so angry. And I said, you something to the effect of, you have an office for left-handed people who cross the street sideways, but what are you doing for young people? And he argued with me, and I replied that I do go to city council meetings. I go to zoning committee meetings because there are gas stations and liquor stores in my neighborhood, and my sister, who goes to a college down the street, has bookstores and libraries. And I don't understand why she gets that and I get this. And I thought I could go toe-to-toe with Maynard Jackson. I was really wrong. And what sounded articulate and thoughtful and impassioned in my head did not translate in my voice. And so he won that argument, but to his credit. And yes, I gave my parents' phone number out because school was almost over. It was finals. And you didn't have a cell phone. So they needed to know how to reach me because I was organizing all these students across Atlanta to be mad at the mayor. So I'm like, call me at, and I give my mother's phone number. I get home that night. My parents are like, what did you do? I'm like, yeah, I didn't think it through. Sorry. But yeah, so he invited me. But so when I get to Avery, so there's the Maynard moment, that moment where someone with power tells you you are wrong and that you don't have the right to critique what has happened. I want her to know that she has that power. There is the injustice that she sees, and even if she doesn't know exactly what it is, she feels a burning need to know because someone she cares about was willing to put his life on the line to find out. And there were young people, there were people across the country who, in the wake of those protests, had their very futures threatened, and I want her to sort of grab onto that. And then ultimately, for me, it was, I wanted Avery to know that she could solve the problem, but that the solution wouldn't be the end of it. Because we do live these lives where we hope there are these cinematic moments, well, if I get this, then things are better. No, it never works out that way. But it also means that if I don't get this, things are devastated. I personally can tell you, no, I'm a really good loser. Things continue after. And I wanted her to have to grapple with both of those things, and with the fact that you can get everything right and still things still go wrong.
I think that's a powerful thing to be able to take with you that there's something beyond this moment, whatever this moment is, whether it's a moment of victory or it's a moment of quote unquote defeat, a moment of joy or a moment of sadness, you can get beyond this. There is something beyond this. And I think if we can hold on to that, then that really can encourage us along our way. You know, going further with Avery, the backstory with her mom. Talk us through that relationship and where it comes from.
So I have a younger brother who is doing much, much better, but he has grappled with addiction for 20 plus years. And it has made him, it's forced him to make choices. It's forced us to make choices. I wanted to give her a weak support system because she's got to make these choices, and you know this. So when you're building a character, you have to have an internal problem and an external problem. The external problem, the end of the world. The internal problem, though, is that she desperately wants her mother to be the person she's supposed to be. Her mother isn't capable of being that for her. And she can't tell how long she can hold on, hoping it's going to be so. I also wanted to create a tension that used race, not explicitly, but that created space so that that Rita could be seen as a person and not as a stereotype. If Rita Keene had been African American in this book, there's a lens through which everything she does would be viewed, and it would change the narrative thread of the story. By making her drug-addicted mother white, created a different dynamic, but without having to spend time trying to unpack tropes. I wanted Avery to grapple with being a black woman in this space, having a white mother who has these foibles and these flaws and who has hurt her in unimaginable ways, but whose survival matters to her. Because not only is she trying to save the life of this Supreme Court justice, she's trying to save her mom's life. And that's the person who should be saving her. And so I wanted to really explore that family dynamic because family is really important to me. But I wanted, you've got to do a lot in a little bit of space. And by creating the character of Rita Keene, someone who we see stumble and fall and when it counts, still try to do right, is for me the conversation about family every day. Family is always going to let you down. The issue is, do you let it stay down because mistakes are made? And I grew up with a family that said no, that our job is to lift each other up, no matter how many times you fall, no matter how angry you make us. We will hate each other, but you will not be allowed to hurt us. And we will get over it. We will find ways to redeem each other and support each other and love each other. And I wanted Avery to have to find that in her found family of Ling and Noah and Jared, but also build that with her actual family with Rita.
And as it's funny, you talk about the found family. That was going to be my next question.
See, I'm sorry.
See, I'm like, I don't know what's happening here. I think Stacey might have been looking at my questions, you see.
I don't have my reading glasses on, I promise.
But we do know that she can see into the future because she wrote the book way back when, and you see where we are now. But I mean, you do spend a lot of time on friendships in the story. Why is it important to you to talk about Avery's friends?
Because I've got some really good ones. And also because I love Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And we know that you've got the family that you are born to and the family that you build. And I wanted Avery, she had a lot on her. She needed some relief, some support, and she needed to be able to construct answers without relying on the traditional points of contact. And for me, starting that in While Justice Sleeps and then revisiting it in Rogue Justice, I want her, because hopefully she'll have more stories to tell, I want her to not be bound by what she was given, but to be freed by what she finds. And so because she's found these friends, because she's built these relationships, because she can test herself against them, in both While Justice Sleeps and in Rogue Justice, she can be fallible. She can make mistakes, and they are going to be there for her. And that creates not just a safe space, but it creates a testing ground. Like we're much more courageous when we know our failures aren't fatal. Mm-hmm. And found family means that you've picked the people who are going to let you fail spectacularly. They will blame everybody but you first, which is what you want. And then they'll quietly pull you aside and be like, maybe you shouldn't have done that way. But they're not going to tell everybody first. They're going to tell you first. And that, to me, is if there are internal and external problems, you also want internal and external supports. And for me, that found family is one of the ways that she becomes better at being who she is, but also better at doing what she does.
Now, in Rogue Justice, there's a vast amount of characters in the world. What's interesting to me about the book is that it starts as very linear. I can say, I can follow this, and the world expands and the web reaches so far. But in the midst of that world, there's many women in power, and there are many women as villains, and there also are men too. But
yeah, I let them in there.
Yeah, they slide in. But was this now something when you sat down to start writing the book? Was this something that a choice that you consciously made to have women in diverse and prominent roles?
I wouldn't say it was conscious. I think it was logical. That we see identity, and it is disingenuous to say that identity doesn't matter. And if you're going to surprise a reader, part of it is the story you tell, but also it's the vehicle you use to tell the story. It mattered to me that the FBI, the director of the FBI was a woman, because we haven't seen that. But it also matters to me that, there's some traditional politicians in there who aren't as traditional as they should be. But for me, yes, putting women in positions of power, like putting people of color in positions of power, should become something we're used to. And you can't get used to it if you don't see it, and you can't see it if someone doesn't write it. And so that's what I do.
I wholeheartedly agree with that, where I think there's power in exposure. And what you put out there can make a difference, especially whether it's in a medium like books that people read within their personal time, or a medium like television that comes into people's living rooms and their family time. It really makes a difference. It's a subtle thing to do, but just turning the dial a little bit can make a great change as you go forward. 24 was a huge hit. I have to say that I think Dennis Haysbert had something to do with making people a little bit more comfortable to pull the lever
exactly.
when the time came.
Yeah.
So I do understand that. Now, when I hear things like Cash Money Forum Sting, or Edgar filings, or ERCOT, and let me see, what was that thing, like AI diving and the energy grid? It's just I was like, what? Now, how much research did you have to do to be able to write this world?
My mother was a reference librarian. And so my parents eventually became ministers, but until I was 14, 15, my mom was a reference librarian. When she said, look it up, she meant it. And you couldn't say you can't find it, because she literally was running a college library. I can do microfiche with the best of them. I memorized the Dewey Decimal System. So again, not quite Avery, but really close. So there are two things for me. One is I write because I'm curious. I want to know things. And in my romance novels, in my nonfiction, in my legal fiction, I'm driven by wanting to understand answers, but I also just like knowing new stuff. I wrote a book about ethnobotany because I went to a botanical garden and I'm like, who studies this? And then I ended up reading. It was a really good book on ethnobotany.
That's what we all do. We all do things like that, of course.
But as a writer, for me, part of the challenge is that you want someone who actually knows what you're talking about to know that you respected them when they read the book. And so because I'm writing about politics, because I'm writing about often something in science, because science feels remote and hard. And so I try to write it in such a way that when you leave there, it feels a little more accessible and you feel like you're a little more equipped to have the conversation. So I intentionally pick topics that are complicated or feel difficult. And I do a lot of research. So I spend a lot of time, there are 3 podcasts on the dark web that I know way too much about why my phone is dangerous. If I could have a landline again, I would. I spent a lot of time learning about the energy grid. I actually met someone, I was doing something in DC, and I met someone who worked for FERC, for the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And he smiled. He was like, I've never read about FERC before. I'm like, I imagine not. But it's an important, I mean, it literally controls the lights. And most of us have no idea that it exists. And so part of it for me is it's also deconstructing what we think we know of our world, especially in public policy, and making sure we don't know anything at all, that there is no actual electric grid. So what does that mean? We saw what happened in Texas, and a lot of us said, oh, that's just Texas. No, it could be coming to a grid near you. I know about exploits, and while I'm not a computer programmer, I now know when to be afraid when I'm listening to the news. And so for me, I do a lot of research. I spend a lot of time. My mission is to know it well enough that I can sound knowledgeable without having to actually prove it, and that anyone who understands it knows that there's just enough truth that while what I'm describing didn't happen and probably wouldn't happen, it could. And as long as it could happen, the DNA component of While Justice Sleeps, the AI, the cyber, and the electrical grid issues that I describe in Rogue Justice are all entirely possible. Plausible? Probably not. But possible? Absolutely. And that's why you should be both afraid and interested in reading my next book so I can tell you what's going to come.
Now, some things, though, you do have a deep knowledge of, because, I mean, obviously you got a JD from Yale, and you've been in the political arena for quite some time. Now, how much did that inform your writing when it came to the complicated legal scenes?
Very much. And as I said, I've got 5 brothers and sisters, and each of them is a remarkable font of useful information that makes me look good. So I just exploit each of my siblings to get them to tell me something so I can figure out what I'm talking about. So the Rogue Justice was actually based on, it's not based on my sister Leslie. She's a year younger than I am. She's a federal judge. She went to a conference and she came back, and I was reading through her brochure sitting on my couch. And I'm like, this is what you all talk about? And then I realized that's when I started thinking, nobody really knows what judges do when they're not sitting on the bench. What if they were being exploited? And then I started thinking about what do we really know about the FISA court? They control a lot of power. They can eavesdrop on us, and they don't have to get warrants. Or if they do, we won't ever know that we were on a list. Who knows about that? And so there was a little segment about the FISA court. I then did a rabbit hole dive on the FISA court and came back up, and I'm like, Leslie, are you on the FISA court? She's like, no, you can find out the names, and that's when I learned all about the FISA court. But for all of it, yes, I start with what I know from my time in law, from what I know in politics, from my time. I interned for the EPA and for OMB, so I know I like acronyms. But it lends an air of authenticity to your stories. I know it's a lot of them. I try to pepper them in so that you don't feel like you have to learn them. Now you know how many there are. And the reason for that is that as someone who understands the way government works, one of the ways we distance citizens from power is by making it seem so obtuse and so complicated that you just give up because I can't swim through the alphabet soup, I'll just let you do it. And then you let us get away with stuff for a while. So part of it for me is I want to desensitize you to the remoteness of these acronyms by making you see, look, these acronyms actually connect to things that you might want to care about. But also, if you can make it all the way through when you get to the other side, if you can do it in this book, you can do it in real life too. You'll be fine.
Something else I gathered from Stacey in this conversation is if you want to be a dynamic writer and a vast knowledge, have a lot of siblings. Yes, if you have a lot of siblings. But now, out of all the lanes that you are engaged in, that you are thriving in, which is the one that gives you the most reward?
So for me, it's all of a piece. I write, I was saying this to someone earlier today. I tell stories because I'm curious, and that curiosity leads me to want to find answers. And those answers mean that I need to know more about what's happening. Being a storyteller makes me a better politician. It makes me a better organizer, because I'm going to ask you, how can I help? What do you need? And then I'm going to want to go and find the answer for you. And in finding the answer, I'm going to need to tell you a story about what your world could be like if you did this thing that I'm asking you to do, like vote or show up at a meeting. And if you believe the story I'm telling you, if we have this shared vision, then you might go and do this thing. And if you do this thing, the world becomes a little bit better for someone else. And then we tell the story of how you did that, and that becomes another novel, and that novel then incentivizes someone else to imagine their power. And so I don't separate out the pieces of me. Mm-hmm. They are all together. I am a knot of crazy. So, but I'm a knot of curiosity. I don't separate out the threads. The other way I put it is, someone asked me, why won't you pick a lane? And I'm like, I have. It's called a highway.
I love it.
I don't have to choose. Mm-hmm. And so my mission is to make sure other people know that you too can have the freeway of life that you want.
Love it. Yeah. And I'll say, you may be a knot of crazy, but you may also be a knot of curiosity. You are a knot of courage. You are a knot of compassion. You are a knot of strength. And it's really, truly an honor to sit here. I'm going to soon open it up so that people can ask some questions. But I do have, real quick.
Yes.
I know in the book, it's like While Justice Sleeps, it says Avery Keene #1. Yes. Rogue Justice says Avery Keene #2. Yes. Will there be an Avery Keene #3?
God hope so. Her book is due, her first draft is due this summer. And I am fast and furiously writing it. So yes, there will be a #3.
All right. And then art for me, different forms of artistic expression, is cathartic for me. I always say that theater is my therapy. For you, does writing help you work your way through the challenges that are in the world?
I get to kill a lot of people. That is very cathartic. I will say. I mean, look, there is something about having to figure out different ways to mete out justice. And you might have an image in your head when you're doing parts of it. So, I'm just saying. But it is, I love writing. I mean, but writing's also, as you know, writing's also a business. It's part of my job. And so there is the catharsis of the engagement, but there's also the responsibility of the work. And like right now, I owe my editor a book, and he either gets a book or he wants his money back, and that's gone. So I got to write a book.
And I know this book is fiction, but in real life, kind of turning it towards where we are today. What are the news stories or issues or national problems that is keeping you up at night?
What kind of time we got? So
it's just a question.
I would say we should be paying very close attention, not to the fear-mongering around AI, but to the implicit opportunities and challenges. Bias is real. AI, so I'm not going to go into too much, but large language models basically assume that all the stuff that's on the internet, all the data that exists gets scraped together and plugged in, and that teaches the generative AI, and it teaches machine learning models, so really the ones who actually construct their own ideas, they get that information from somewhere. But if we live in a society that doesn't see everyone, that doesn't give full measure to everyone's experiences, the data that's training AI is data that may not be training AI to see everyone. Mm-hmm. And so I'm thinking about that, and you can read about it in approximately 9 months.
And, now, my last question before we open it up is, I know that you are a fan of television. I mean, you are the president of the Earth. Yes, you are. On Star Trek Discovery, for those of you who did not know, Stacey Abrams made a phenomenal guest appearance, a cameo on that show. And this world of Avery Keene is truly dynamic, as I've said multiple times today. We're here in the Writers Guild, which writes for television. Is there any, in the future, we all know that you can see into the future, can we expect to see Avery Keene show up on the television screen at any time?
Well, so since Lucinda's here, No, we are in the process. It was announced a lot. So yes, I have an option, working with Working Title.
I love it.
But as you know, things take a while to develop. So we'll see what happens.
Well, thank you for taking the time with me.
Yes.
We're in an audience with all these brilliant minds.
We have time to take a few questions, and my first one, I'm taking the floor prerogative. So, Stacey, when your book comes out in 9 months, will you come back here, please?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That was easy.
Okay, so there are mics on either side, and, ask, no speeches, just questions. And so while we're waiting for a few questions, what else is really frightening for you, Stacey?
Well, democracy is in trouble. And this is not hyperbole. We are watching states continue to erode access to the right to vote. Georgia just passed another set of very insane laws that will increase the likelihood that a legal voter gets kicked off of the rolls. We know across the country, in Mississippi is one of 3 states that does not have early voting. And they were this close to getting 15 days of in-person early voting, and it got killed by a state legislator who doesn't want more people to participate. But we're also in the year of what we call mega elections. There's 64 countries that were holding elections this year. We tend to think of ourselves as the center of the universe in terms of democracy, but we are also emblematic of the fragility of democracy. And we need to be paying attention to those other nations, because their choices about whether they will choose democracy or autocracy, whether they are going to continue to follow a path of expanding access to the right to vote or start constricting it, they learn from how we behave. But we also learn what we should be by what we send out into the world. So worried about democracy, worried about AI. I'm worried about, about to be coy. I think those are the 2 big things. I think the last thing is that we have a disconnection happening where we are blaming young people for their reactions instead of helping provide context and legitimacy to the urge to feel and do. I grew up with parents who were activists as children, as teenagers. They raised us to be activists. There's a respect that is owed to every human. There is a necessity for engagement, but there's also a legitimacy to each generation figuring out their way. And I know some of us get tired of waiting for them to figure it out the way we did, and that's just not right. So.
Okay, we have time for some quick questions.
So I'm gonna have you guys, I'm gonna go have each of you ask, and then I'll do 3 questions at a time. So go.
Okay. So again, thank you for doing this. This is just awesome. I had my 2 questions. Dulé asked them, and you answered. So I'm going to switch to compliments, not a critique. I grew up, my first books were Nancy Drew, Hardy Boys, all of those. I was in the thriller and mystery lane. So your romance novel, Selena Montgomery, was my first romance. How many people have read it? Show your hands. Well, you're in for something.
We got to have a quick
Yes.
questions, because
Your question is, will you buy it?
Well, buy it because it was so steamy. I'm a married woman and didn't get all of that. And then also, thank you for your book, Road Justice. Yes, that I always have to use my dictionary. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Who is your favorite person in your circle to get feedback from when you're sending out a manuscript for the first time? Who are you most excited to send it to, is my question.
So the very first person who reads every one of my books is my sister Leslie. So she read my first romance novel. Leslie is the consummate reader. She reads she's a lawyer who is very precise about language. She is a romantic, so she wants people to be happy and to be successful. She is an editor, so she won't tell me how to say it, but she'll be like, this doesn't work. And she's honest, because we're 11 months and 27 days apart. If I was going to get rid of her, I would have already. And So she is my most honest critic. Once she has, so in fact, I just shared with her the first few chapters of the third book, and she was like, I was like, what did you think? And she's like, I gasped. I'm like, thank you, it worked. Because she's the perfect audience member. But she's also she then said, these two things are wrong. This one doesn't do what you think it does, and go and read this book. So there you go.
I hope to start a career as a writer, but also be out in public and not at home writing all the time in my own room. And you've obviously balanced that incredibly well with a national public profile and prolific writing career. So I'm wondering, as a practical matter, how do you balance that, especially when you have so many ongoing projects and have ran for major office and things like that?
So thank you. So I do not believe in work-life balance. It's a lie. Unless you are a billionaire, it is a lie. I believe in work like Jenga. So you stack up all the things you're trying to do, and you pick the thing you're going to pull on that day. So I organize. So Samantha, part of her job is to help make sure all of this works. I told her about 7 months ago, I need 40 writing days to be allocated to me. We're close. But with those days, so I know on those days, my job is to write. If I do not write on those days, then my job is to figure out how to go back in time and have written what I was supposed to write. But that also means I've got to do my research, I've got to be organized. I also have to decide what matters to me. And the other part of Jenga is not that everything isn't important, it's that you have, Dwight Eisenhower said it, you have things that are important and urgent, things that are important but not urgent, things that are urgent but not important, and things that are neither important nor urgent. We have to have all of those in our Jenga game. And if your writing is important but not urgent, you can do it, but you may not do it tomorrow. If your writing is urgent but not important, meaning you promise somebody you'd get them something and it might be crap when you write it, but you're going to do it anyway, you'll give it that. If it's important and urgent, you have a book due and they want their book, you'll get that done. Or if you need to recharge your brain and you have to find, an episode of Ballers, or you have to watch Gus and Psych in its 14th movie, or if you want to do a deep cut, you want to go back to Holes and watch a young Dulé Hill try to save, a young man. So that also goes in there. But you've got to give yourself all of those pieces, and you've got to be willing to understand that you're going to pull the wrong piece and the whole thing is going to crash down. And that's okay, because the whole point of Jenga is you just build it up and you start again.
Thank you.
Work-life Jenga, the Stacey Abrams way.
Hi, my name is Ava Brown. I'm a grad student at USC for Annenberg. So I'm studying journalism and public relations. So I spend a lot of time amplifying other people's voices and stories, and that's something I'm very passionate about. But I guess I wanted to ask you, you're very bold, you're very strong, you know what you want, and you know you're going to get it. How did you learn to really amplify your own voice?
Oh, I don't know I'm going to get anything. But thank you. I'm glad you believe that. So there's a theory in Stoic philosophy, is that we are not judged by the outcome, we can only be judged by the effort. That's how I enter the world. I can't decide how people are going to see me, feel me. I don't look like what they're expecting. I don't operate the way they think I should, and that they can apply across a range of issues. I can't make people like me, I can't make them love me, I can't make them want me, and I can't make them keep me. But what I can control is, what do I do to show what I believe? What can I do to try to make change? What can I do to try to get my things done? What effort can I put in? If I know that I'm putting in my best effort, then the outcome, while important, it's outside of my control. Boldness is often muted by worry about how other people perceive you. They don't know what I'm doing. I do. And as long as I know I'm doing what I can, then what people perceive as boldness is most often just me doing what I think I need to do, and not being afraid of the fact that if I don't get it done, or if it's not done to my satisfaction, that doesn't diminish who I am. I may lose, but the last thing I say on this is I learn my lessons, not my losses. I am not defined by the things I don't get. I'm defined by what I tried to do to make it happen.
Hi, thank you for doing this and thank you for being here. I'm here with USC too. We're actually here as part of the Charlotta Bass Lab at USC, and our mission is to document and share Black media that change the world. So, if and when you guys are ever looking for your next talk, there's 55,000 students at USC who will give you a warm welcome, I'm sure.
Well, thank you.
So I hope we can, I hope that happens. But the president of Earth thing in Star Trek that Dulé mentioned, right? Usually when people do that, they're kind of teasing future ambitions. And the interesting thing about this election is that whoever wins can't run again. They're done. And so 2028 is kind of looking wide open. And you could, I'm sorry, you could make a lot of headlines depending on either way you go here. But I don't know about you and I don't know about y'all, but I don't want to see President Ron DeSanctimonious in 2028. So do you want to help us keep Meatball Ron in Florida? Just asking.
I am more than happy to run to be president of United Earth. Everything else is under consideration.
I don't know how to top that, but thank you for being here.
Don't try.
I'm not going to try, I promise. My name is Taylor. I'm a student at USC. I am so inspired by you. So my question for you is, as a woman who is so multifaceted and you have so many talents across so many industries, how do you respond to people that try to limit you and put you in a box?
My answer earlier, so when I was younger, my mom once said to me, because I was doing a bunch of stuff, and she said, Stacey, you don't want to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. What she meant was pick something and stick with it. What I heard was master everything. I haven't quite done that, but I have three things I believe in: be curious, solve problems, and do good. And wherever that takes me is where I'm supposed to be. No one else has to go with me. Mm-hmm. And so I don't worry that much about, now it's hard. It's hard to explain me to people. Yeah. I'm like a reality show waiting to happen in a single person. I'm a romance novelist, tax attorney, businesswoman who was on Star Trek. Dude, you wouldn't read that book. That's weird. But what I know is that I'm intentional about what I do. I am open to what it means, and I can adapt to what it becomes. And as long as I do those pieces, it is hard. It's hard to get people to understand. In fact, I'm glad you guys all understand. I write books, because people are like, wait, you write books? I saw your name. I just thought it was some other Stacey Abrams. Like, how many Stacey Abrams are there? But what I say to you is, you can pick a lane, but it can be a freeway. You don't have to go to the place they tell you, and you don't have to get there the way they tell you, as long as you know why you're going and you're willing to learn along the way. Because I make lots of mistakes. I choose things that maybe I shouldn't choose, but I never let it define. It's not an indictment of who I am. It's just a choice. And if I'm willing to learn from that choice, correct it if I've hurt someone, do better if I didn't do my best, that's how I measure. Not based on somebody else's sensibility of what I should or should not be.
It's very inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor.
Good evening. I agree. My name is Teresa Hillary. Thank you so much for being here. I read It's Our Time Now, and I ran for office for the first time.
Awesome.
For the Los Angeles City Council. Thank you very much. And I'm not going to stop there. Now I'm going to try and get more people engaged in the political process. Awesome. But did I hear you say that you will run again for governor? I hope you do.
I don't know what you were listening to. I will say this. Politics is one of the tools I use to do the work I believe needs to be done. And there are always opportunities to try and do better. I don't know what I'm going to do next, but I know I'm not done. So,
thank you.
Okay, you get the last question. Make it the most transformative, mind-blowing.
Wow.
I'm just saying, pressure's on.
Yes. So my name is Haley Tharp. I have a business called Legally Well where I teach lawyers the importance of self-care. So when you said that you don't believe in work-life balance, I was like, no, we have to get there. But with that being said, in this moment, what would you say you're most grateful for?
So I'm going to push back on you on the balancing. Balance assumes that things are treated exactly the same.
Okay.
And when people think of balance, they ignore the fact that sometimes you have to give primacy to something. That if you are always striving for balance, you're always leaving something off, or you tell yourself you can't have something. That's why I say Jenga. Jenga presumes that things are going to fall. But that doesn't mean you don't try to make them work. You still try to win. So I'm not saying no self-care, I'm just saying no lying to ourselves.
Yes, and I love your Jenga because to me, that's balance. That's fitting what needs to be fit in for the day, for the week. That's my balance. So
Okay.
I love that.
Well, thank you. Then you and I are of a mind.
Yes.
So what I'm grateful for, I have 6 nieces and nephews, and they are the most adorable people in the world. They range in age from 8 to 18. 2 of them are on their way to college, and one of them I call my borrowed teenager because she and my parents live with me. She just figured out where she's going to college, and the joy that she feels about the danger of going to college is exciting because she knows that it's not going to be easy. She knows that it's going to be a challenge. And she said to me the other day that living with me for the last few years has helped her be braver about what she's willing to test herself to do. Because we had a conversation about fear once, and I was like, look, and I say this a lot, like, fear is not a problem. It's not bad to be afraid. Fear tells us something. I say take your fear out to lunch, get to know it, find out its favorite color.
Okay.
Because fear is trying to teach us something, warn us about something. Our job is to understand and investigate that fear and prepare for it. And when she told me that she was okay with being afraid, like, that brings me joy because it means that as much pontificating as I do as an aunt telling her what she should or should not do, a teenager listened to me. That is awesome.
So
I'll just say really quickly, I think we all realized that we could all use a Stacey Abrams in our ear. If we had a Stacey Abrams in our ear every day going throughout our lives, how much more productive would our lives be? How much more better would our lives be? Unfortunately, there's only one Stacey Abrams. So I want to say thank you, though, for taking your time to share your voice in our ears today. It truly has been a wonderful experience for me, and I hope it's been a wonderful experience for the audience as well.
Thank you.
from me, too. Thank you.
Hold on.
Thank you.
He didn't necessarily absolutely want to do this. This was not in his wheelhouse. But who is willing to watch the Dulé Hill show on every channel?
Thank you. I faced my fear. You see, I had found joy in fear.
And we will see you back here with your new book. We heard it here. But I want to ask a favor of all of you. Stacey is going to leave, and I ask that you stay in your seats so that she can leave easily through the aisle and alone. Okay? So, I don't know how else to say it. So,
well done.
Yeah. So, thanks to all of you for coming. Thanks to all of the students. Thanks to Dulé and to Stacey.